we believe that the most immediate one for you guys is that basically the EU is trying to reduce the flow of products associated with past deforestation to the EU market. Maybe more a visionary one is reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting biodiversity. But really, what it means in practice is definitely the first one. The EU is trying to stop the flow of products with negative environmental effects to the EU. The target commodities are beef, cocoa, coffee, soy, timber, wood, palm oil, and soy, and its derivatives. So what does it mean? For example, it means that cocoa butter placed on the EU market would be also falling under the scope of the legislation. So, and what is the liability? What does it mean? It means that any individual or legal person who places products or its derivatives on the EU market or exports them out of the EU, from the EU market, has to basically comply with the legislation. Now, there are differences in terms of who is an operator and a trader. Basically, there are two differentiators, and it is about the size of the entity. So for SME operators, which would be companies under 250 employees and less than 50 million turnover, would have a very simplified liability. And then the biggest portion really lies with the non-SME operators and traders who need to exercise the whole due diligence system and handle due diligence liability. So I will now focus on the non-SME operators and traders, because really the SME operator diligence is about collecting very basic information on its suppliers, is restricted to really name, address, contact details, and an obligation to inform and cooperate with the EU authorities. Now back to the non-SME operators and traders and the due diligence liability under the legislation. It's a threefold. First of all, it's about data collection. Secondly, it's a risk assessment based on the data collected. And third is exercising mitigation measures. Now, all this is supposed to be effective as of end of this year, calendar year, so 30th of December. And as far as it seems, despite the press, the commissioner is pretty firm on the effective date. So we don't expect that that's going to change significantly. Please, next slide. Now, high level, what does it mean for operators and traders? It really does mean that companies will need to get to know and closely engage with their supply chain. What that means is farmers and other suppliers will need to increase the traceability of sourced products, basically knowing where they come from, what is the origin of them, which means collecting more data on origin of the crops and its growers. And it also means that companies will need to increase their internal capacity to assess and manage risk. To be able to demonstrate that the products placed on the EU market are threefold. They are free from deforestation. They're produced in accordance with the legislation of an origin country, meaning that they're not illegally grown or processed, and that they're covered by the due diligence system and statement. I will quickly just go back to what does it mean free from deforestation. I think for this call, it's good to know that the cutoff date is 31st of December 2020, which means that any product which is placed on the EU market should not come from an area which has been exposed to deforestation or forest degradation after this date. So it means that if a deforestation or degradation has happened before, it, in the eyes of the EU or of the legislation, it is not a problem, if you want. So that would not be sort of impacting the products and the business activity. If we can move on. Yeah. A quick glimpse on where, according to the latest research, companies stand with the readiness to the EU for the EUDR, and alignment of their internal systems is basically the dark green is ready. The more mint green is not yet ready or not ready. I want to just say that this represents all companies across sectors. It is not a commodity specific representation. Definitely there is a variation across commodities and across sectors. We, for example, see that coffee as a commodity and related sectors are readier than, for example, cocoa. But then again, it really is commodity and also country specific. If we can move on, I would like to give two deep dives. One is on the data collection requirement, and then the second one will be on the risk assessment system. So really the data collection requirements cover three sort of big buckets. One is what you could call master data in the corporate speak, would be related to the description, quantity of the commodity, will be related to the supplier or farmer. And then the second bucket is related to the geolocation. So that's the piece on really the commodity traceability. Here, a very important distinction for both farmers and companies is related to the size of land from which a given commodity comes. So anything, any piece of land which is smaller than 4 hectares just needs two coordinates, GPS coordinates, so latitude and longitude. And any piece of land which is bigger than 4 hectares needs a full GPS polygon. I'm mentioning this because it usually means there is a different resources and budget associated with acquiring such information, such data. I see a lot of raised hands. Maybe you guys want to, if you can keep your hand raised, or you can drop your question to the comments or the messages section as well, whatever works better for you. And third is something which is often a bit overlooked in my experience and impression, and that's sort of the proving of legality, which is related to the more the country or regional legality and jurisdictional system, meaning is there a law which, for example, says farmers are not allowed to farm in protected areas, and such commodity would be deemed as illegal in a given country. It also theoretically means, and that's something which is not really spoken about, we don't know to what extent it will be really implemented or executed. It would also mean things related to legality or in the social and labor conditions, so labor law. As a lot of you, I'm sure know, cocoa sector is associated with child labor and forced labor. So theoretically, this would also fall under the requirements. Again, the implementation and execution of that is questionable. Can we move on? Second deep dive will be on the risk assessment system. So any trader or operator is required to basically establish, maintain, and update the risk assessment system, which takes quite a number of criteria into consideration. And unfortunately, the EU Commission and bodies have not been very helpful in providing tools in this regard, which would allow companies to basically execute this system across the board. So really, there is a guidance on what the risk assessment should take into consideration. However, it is not the risk assessment system itself. So I will just mention a couple of those. So it is taken into consideration assessment of presence of forests, presence of indigenous people, their rights, their claims. It's about prevalence of deforestation or forest degradation, assessing source reliability and validity of the information above. It is concerns in relation to the risk in the country of production, its complexity of the relevant or particular supply chains, etc. So really here, there has been calls, especially from the civil society and NGO sector, for the EU Commission to provide more tools and basically standardized guidance on how to execute the system. And I would like to just sort of close this part now, mention a couple of the ongoing discussions, impacts, and criticisms. As I have mentioned, the implementation due date seems to stand firm according to the latest news. And yes, I mean, we see that the main criticism comes from companies in terms of them struggling to comply on time, and basically given the supply chain constraints, the complexity, and also the question of who should pay for this. So we also hear and see that many expect that the EU will provide some funding to, for example, set up traceability systems and streamline data collection across companies. The second piece will be related to the criticism on lack of guidance and tools to basically standardize, yes, data collection, the risk assessment methodologies, and different definitions. And then last but not least, and that's a nice bridge to be on, is the whole question around EU once again building the EU wall and presenting a trade barrier, especially for smallholder farmers who actually really not many expect that they will bear the cost of implementing the EUDR or due diligence system. And I would pause here. Thank you for the attention. We'll open for questions after Beyond, correct? We'll share the slides after the presentation, just for information, and you're free to contact me after the call.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Thanks for the question. Let's also highlight again. We would like to take comments. So if you have a question, we'll respond to your question. The presentation is being recorded. Afterwards, we'll share with everyone. So a little bit make it organized so that we don't have random interference from everywhere. So just for us to get your questions, then we'll respond to your questions. We'll also engage Beyond on a one-on-one conversation in the next couple of minutes, and Nicole as well before Beyond comes up. So Nicole, just before Beyond comes up, I want to maybe open some discussion with you to understand the kind of what to expect in terms of the meeting the requirements. Yeah, you did mention sizes of land and taking the hectares and all of that, and also other things you mentioned. So now for exporters and for processors, what are the key requirements? What are the key things they need to focus on? What are the most do that they need to focus on right now? Because we have barely 5 months to go. So what are those things that you think are very important right now to focus
on? It's knowing who you work across your supply chain to get basically ready for or continuing the ability to export, right? So it really depends on who your clients are and who the suppliers are. So that would be the first thing I would say. Second is basically the is assessing what type of data is at the moment readily available, right? And what is the gap? So kind of a data itinerary gap analysis. Third would be a plan how to bridge the gap. Fourth would be how to finance it. And fifth would be the implementation timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. So just to also take you back a little bit, you did mention about the timeline implementation and how it's done into based on the category of the companies and also the small other farmers. So a lot of companies, a lot of people across the continent, we're thinking about maybe a possible extension or a possible maybe a special maybe a special approval for them to stay before meeting of the requirement. Do you think it's something that EU is considering at the moment, despite the pressure from the emerging economies?
We don't expect that. We don't expect it. There is definitely also a sort of internal pressure. By that I mean the EU countries are complaining that they own farmers or commodity traders and operators who are exporting from the EU might be negatively affected. And even there, the Commission is pushing back. Yeah? So knowing that, we don't really expect that there will be too much of an extension.
Okay, fantastic. So I think we'll bring him here to tell us the impact that will have on the life of smallholder farmers. Bjorn, maybe you want to go ahead, please. While Bjorn is preparing a screen, I see some people raising their hands. It'd be nice if you can drop your questions on the chat. We're also able to answer all of that. So we'll take questions on the chat instead of opening up the microphone to speak. Thank you very much. Bjorn, please.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Nicole, for the wonderful insights. Yeah, and my name is Vion, joining in from Kenya, the country director Zowasel. So I'm going to take us through insights of what we expect the EUDR regulations to have, what kind of impact we expect the regulations to have on smallholder farmers. So quickly through that, well, we think about it in two ways, that there will be opportunities and then there are maybe the challenges in the adoption of the same. So as we know that the agricultural commodities that will be affected drivers to many African countries, up to 25% of their GDP coming from agriculture and 60% of employment. And so, and moreover, the EU represents one of the largest and lucrative markets for this product. And so we would hope that with this regulation, it would encourage more sustainable practices. So by adhering to sustainable farming practices, this would also lead to environmental conservation. And so that smallholder farmers can position themselves as environmental stewards. And number two, diversified market access as a result of adoption of the EUDR, which would open up access to a vast environmentally conscious foreign market for smallholder farmers in Africa and in general. And also, thirdly, this would hopefully strengthen producer groups and cooperatives. So by adoption of these regulations, farmers can hopefully come together and pool resources and knowledge to ensure compliance with the regulations and meet sustainability standards collectively. We also hope, fourthly, that this would drive technology. So by adoption of sustainable practices and technological innovation and adoption, smallholder farmers can benefit from modern techniques of farming, such as regenerative farming methods and agroforestry. Then we hope that the demand for certification and training services will also result from the adoption of these regulations. And then now training service providers for smallholder farmers may increase, and these will also, of course, lead to higher productivity. However, we also anticipate that there will be challenges due to some factors. Let's say, for instance, the transition period, since they come into effect at the end of this year, that's really a short period, given that farmers are only, some of them do not actually know. We've been through stakeholder meetings and we've seen that farmers are surprised to hear that there is even such a regulation. There are also administrative and legal challenges occasioned by sustainable land use planning, which will require harmonization of regulations and legal frameworks to land allocation and utilization. Then there will be productivity challenges will also arise, since now there's limitation to how much of land can be used. Then there will be need for productivity per, let's say, square per hectare to be able to cope with the needed production. Then, of course, the financial, material, and human resources are not sufficient, and this will hinder implementation of sustainability protocols, as there are costs associated in the adoption and complying with sustainability measures that pose an extra burden. So then, like I mentioned before, there is limited access to information. Smallholders still do not have full information, and they probably do not know where to go to be able to fully comply. Then, of course, ultimately, all these imposes a market barrier and exclusion as a result. Yeah, so while the EUDR deforestation requirements pose opportunities for growth and sustainability, there are still challenges that need to be addressed to be able to transition, such as technical assistance and market diversification. Yes, over to you, Jerry.
Oh, yes, Bjorn, thank you very much. Ifeoma, please, can you change the slide? So we'll take the questions. Just to open the door now for questions. I can see some questions coming on the chat. But one quick one I would like to ask Nicole, first of all, to understand. We understand the EUDR is also spread out to not just raw materials like cocoa or oil palm, cashew nuts, sesame or cocoa, and all of those crops. I also want to understand, it did mention about raw materials, about processed materials, meaning if any product is processed using any of those mentioned commodities, it also would be affected. Can you explain about that? Can you explain more about that? How does that work? How would that work in practice?
Yes, that's correct. So basically, anybody placing a product which contains a commodity which falls under the EUDR scope has to comply with the due diligence system. So that would mean that the first operator or trader placing that product has to comply with it. So it means that you need to go to the BOM, right? The bill of materials in a given product, and then break it down to commodity. And then if you're not the first to place a product on the market, you would basically need to reference the due diligence statement and system of your supplier, who is the one to place a given product in the market.
Thank you, Nicole. So second question here is also to understand that the EUDR places emphasis on mapping and all of those farm coordinates. But unfortunately, lots of those maps and those coordinates that are available on public spaces are probably in most African countries maps that have been done some years ago before independent or independent. So now, how would Europe cope with the new growth in Africa? We have a lot of more population coming in. That means going to be urbanization. That also means that more farms need to be open for cultivation to meet the growing population. So how is the EU thinking about mitigating that or meeting that that growth that we've seen across Africa? Across Africa, averagely we've seen growth over 50% in the last maybe 60 years. So how is EU looking into that?
So if I understand the question correctly, you're more concerned, or the question is about the future growth and the future supply.
No, not the future growth. The maps available at the EU disposal are old maps that show reserve areas across the continent. But we've seen growth, population growth. We've also seen urbanization. We've seen roads also going into a lot of forest area. So just 2 days ago, there was a report here in Nigeria that says deforestation have taken over I think over 20% of Nigeria landscape.
So I understand. So first, the definition of deforestation in this sense is very specific to land use change for agricultural purposes. So it excludes urbanization and urbanization pressures and even infrastructure. So that would not be deemed as deforestation. And secondly, yes, so what is good is that the EUDR implementation is supported by some budgets which go into things like forest restoration programs with specific countries. I have not so far seen anything specific to Nigeria, but basically, yeah. So EU has just granted, I think, or is just negotiating like 150 million type of loan project with the government of Cote d'Ivoire, and we expect that there will be more initiatives like these.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So let me quickly go to you, Bjorn. Just give me an idea of how the farmers taking this, and how will they find funding for transition? Because for you to do this, that means you need a lot of education. You need a lot of enlightenment to get the farmers to understand the rules and also understand the regulation, understand the do's and don'ts. So how do you think smaller farmers across the continent are taking this, and how are they even aware, and how are they reacting to this? Are you there, Bjorn?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so first of all, like I mentioned, they are hardly aware. Yeah, so like we were trying to take feedback from the first set of stakeholder workshops that we had, and we realized that they are still very surprised that this is taking it forward. So we think that there is still a lot of room for sensitization. There is need for capacity building, synergies between value chain actors, development partners, and all stakeholders to ensure that farmers are adequately supported to be able to adhere. But given that, as the situation currently is, I think farmers will really struggle to be able to meet these requirements and regulations. And I don't think it's just should be left to farmers, but I think we should holistically approach this. It's supposed to take a holistic approach to be able to meet this. Maybe a lot of lobbying to see what can be done, what maybe can be held off. But I sincerely think that it's going to take a while, and there's more investment in terms of resources, human, technical, and all that needs to go into it to be able to adhere. Yeah.
Thank you, Vion. So Nicole, let me come back to you. Give me our understanding.
Jerry, can we take the question? There is a raised hand from the audience. Can
yes,
we
maybe Martins,
maybe
Martins and others, maybe you want to drop your questions. It would be nice to have your questions in the chat so that we can address them. If you don't mind, please. Yeah, so let me come to you, Nicole. Just want to get a clarity on the EUDR. Who is the EU expecting to take responsibility for this process? Because you understand the value chain is life. You have from the farmers down to maybe down to the aggregators, down to the exporters, and also down to the processors, and also the final consumers. So I want to understand who is EU clearly expecting to take care of this process to provide guidelines and all the resources?
Well, that's very clear. It's anybody who's placing the product on the EU market, any entity. So if it's a single farmer placing a product on EU market, then he or she would fall under the simplified category. But if it's a company of more than 250 people and certain turnover, then it would be the company. So it really, the EU expects that anybody who is selling a product and is the first one to offer it on the EU market is liable. But there is no guidance on who should finance it. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
Who bears the cost?
Absolutely. So that was what I was going to understand, who bears the cost, because but also give an idea. So what do you think will happen now? Maybe two questions in one, but I just want to have your perspective in terms of what will happen January 1, particularly in maybe West Africa. We've seen countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, maybe getting a little bit prepared. But countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, I don't think they are anywhere close to preparation. So what do you think will happen afterwards?
Yeah, well, the Ivorian government says that they are ready, so they are sort of setting up their own monitoring system and sort of providing tools to the companies and farmers. We expect that the EU will support this with some kind of tooling, or maybe like free traceability and geolocation taking apps and stuff. But that's to be seen. There is a lot of collaboration with the European Space Agency as well. So we expect that there will be something, but for the time being, the private sector is responsible for its own.
Thank you. So there's a question beyond Nicole. Someone is asking, is there a timeline for this? So maybe you want to come in and provide some insight to that.
Yes. So. And the compliance will hit as of end of this annual year. So calendar year, sorry. So it's basically 30th December 2024. So anybody exporting on that date or after that date needs to comply with EUDR.
Thank you very much, Bjorn. Just also emphasize that will not be taking questions through the microphone, or would like people to drop their question on the chat and we'll also respond to all your questions. So if you don't mind, Martins, I see Martin, I see Aliru, maybe you just drop your questions. We'll definitely answer your questions. So Vion, let me come to you, Vion. So what do you think will be the implication for smallholder farmers? Now, this is talking practically on the African continent. So take a country like Nigeria, where there's no preparation in terms of having farmers being educated. So what do you think will happen for crops like maybe cocoa, crops like maybe oil palm, crops like maybe soybean that are clearly mentioned in the EUDR?
So there'll be, of course, maybe limited market to the EU. I'm just speculating, but there will be also, let's say, spillover effects for markets that do not have similar stringent measures. So there'll be, it will be both ways, maybe limited market access to the EU, but maybe diversification elsewhere. So yeah, that's what I foresee. But then, so there will be both, let me say, negative and positive impact, and over a long period of time, maybe after sensitization, after capacity building, then we'll see more and more adherence, as maybe in future it will not only be the EU regulating, but as these effects are felt more and people start, like as we start becoming more environment stewards. But yeah, like I just mentioned, I don't see full adherence happening in the next 6, is it now we're in May? In the next 7 months, it will be an uphill task for all farmers to be able to adhere. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I would say.
So just some questions and comments on the chat. I have here from Joshua. Yes, absolutely. We very happy to partner with big corporates. We have lots of solutions to help big corporates achieve their meet the EUDR deforestation-free crops. I also see comment from Samuel. Yes, maybe I also need to call on Nicole to emphasize the link between the EUDR and also maybe regenerative agriculture, because I think there's somehow connect between those two. So maybe Nicole, you want to provide emphasis. Samuel is asking that he has concern about productivity limits. So maybe you want to put some clarity between those two regulations.
I would agree that especially in countries where the yield per hectare are low, we know that that has led to deforestation. It's one of the drivers. It's not the main, it's not the only main driver, right? But it's one of the main drivers. So yes, there is a need to increase yield. However, I would welcome or invite people and companies to open up their minds in terms of what it means yield, especially from the farmer perspective and productivity. So we know that in certain commodities, especially, there has been a lot of sort of a top-down pressure to increase yield in monoculture environment, meaning planting and growing one crop on one piece of land, which is obviously great for the processors, but it might not necessarily be great for farmers because of risks associated with growing monocultures. And yes, one of them is, pest and diseases and over time declining yields. And I would love maybe really somewhere to learn about the effects of synthetic fertilizer and herbicides, because most of studies and also most of what we see in the Western world where synthetic fertilizers have been used longer because they were financially more accessible, we see that soils are depleted and we do not have bigger yields. We simply don't. So it's a long-term illusion that's the effect. And maybe depending on a country, again, we have seen the prices of synthetic fertilizers skyrocketing for farmers. They cannot afford them, and they don't want to buy them. Because basically there is a choice between, okay, do I feed my family or do I buy synthetic fertilizer, where the yield increase might hit in depending on a crop, within 3 to 18 months. But it's not a sustainable increase. And if you look then at the final bill for farmer, it is far from guaranteed that the price and cost of fertilizers will be offset by the increase in yield, if there is any.
Thank you, Nicole. Just two questions here sent to me directly. So I think I also seen a little question here. He mentioned about almost the same, like the first one you've answered, yield and all of those productivity issues. So I would just want to summarize this in terms of what he said, maybe to provide direct questions to Nicole. What do you think in terms of looking at the African continent? Is it that the continent needs to open, has opening more farms, creating more deforestation, yield results against improving the existing farms through maybe more sustainable to increase the yield? So what would you advise? Because I think some of the bone of contention is as the population increases, more land needs to be open. While on the other hand, the existing farmlands are not properly utilized in terms of yield per hectare. So what would you say?
I mean, I'm a white person from Europe, first of all. I can speak from what we see here. I see farmers who focus on more local and regional markets. So maybe that is really something to explore as well. And basically, looking at how can I support my community and near distance markets with my production, because in midterm I might be better off.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So maybe I'll just go to Beyond, but let me also emphasize to everyone here that we're not taking live questions. So maybe you want to drop your comments or your questions in the chat. We will definitely address all of them. Please, that's really only option we have to take questions. We are running out of time. We have less than 8 minutes to go. Beyond, let me come to you. Traditionally, in the last 60 years or 160 years to say, Europe has been our major market in Africa. Major commodities across the continent go to Europe. But now with the EUDR coming into force in the next 6 months, what do you think? What markets do you think is possible for African farmers and exporters?
Oh, well, there are, let's say, local markets. There are to other continents. Yeah, so that's what I would say, that there are probably traditional markets locally and to other destinations. Yeah, but just to also reinforce that eventually I think we somehow have to look at deforestation and this climate change positively, because it's affecting us currently. Even in our country, there's a lot of flooding and extremities. So as we grapple with adopting the regulations, we again have to think about sustainable agriculture eventually. So just to go back to the market equation, there is local, there within the what can I say, within Africa, within ourselves, we can still trade. There are other continents, as of course we also think about sustainable agriculture. Yeah.
Thank you, Beyond. So just a question here also for sent to me directly. Nicole, I think this is for you. So someone is asking in terms of is the EUDR driving the prices of commodity we've seen around the continent, especially cocoa? So what's your take on that?
I don't think that the price of cocoa is really influenced by EUDR. The cocoa harvest has been poor. Yes, there is some nervosity around EUDR, but if you have seen the news yesterday, the fall on the cocoa market is even faster than the rise in the cocoa market, which is ridiculous. It does not really have that much effect on the farmers in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, which are the biggest producers, because the price is state regulated. So yeah, I mean, I think we will see more companies not being able to hedge that, and some of them are closing them. There will definitely be more consolidation.
Yeah, there's someone is asking. Yeah, I think you've answered this initially, but maybe I'll take it again. Someone is asking here to understand that are there provision for from the EU to support smallholder farmers directly in making them to comply with regulation?
Yeah, that's someone asked that question. It has been historically, or any institution which is trying to do something in terms of climate or nature finance, has been very bad at distributing any funds or granting any funds to local populations. There are different reasons for that. If something does not change fundamentally, we expect that it will be the same in this case, meaning that there will be intermediaries who will work with farmers and cooperatives and communities, which will likely keep the historical issues, like, there is a pressure to comply with certain standards in terms of what the EU wants. So it's not really farmer-centric. So I would have a question in return, like what does Samuel and others think the farmers and local population would need in order to be empowered?
So that's a good question. I think maybe we can throw that to Bjorn. We have just 2 minutes to go. Bjorn, in 1 minute, can you answer that? What do you think the farmers will need to be able to comply to the new regulation?
Thank you. So they'll need all the stakeholders and value chain actors support. They'll need public sector support. They'll need development partners. They'll need even the EU support. So it's a holistic approach, and yeah, so they need awareness first. They need the financial, technical resources. They need partnerships. They need support to be able to comply with the certification. So yeah, and within the limited period of time, I mean, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work for us, for all the stakeholders, but it can be done. It can be done, and yeah. So with time, with all the support, I think complying, it's possible. Also, there is going to be need for policy in terms of policy stuff to do with land tenure regulations and all that. So there's need for lobbying, and so it's both private sector, public sector, and all the value chain actors work to be able to achieve this. No one party can do it by themselves. Yeah, but together can be done.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicole. We just have a minute to go. Thanks everyone for joining. Those raising their hands,
everybody.
Drop your questions, but just to address maybe 2 things. Yes, at ZOASA we've been working on some technologies to provide to help processors, to help farmers to achieve EUDR. In the coming days, the coming weeks, we'll begin to talk about these technologies, open them for people to begin to use. In the last 3 years, we've been piloting some technologies around the cocoa oil palm value chain, also around the sesame soya-based value chain. So we will do some major announcements in the coming weeks. Also, we have more webinars coming. I think we should have one coming that will talk about the technology itself, and also bring some of our partners we're working with to come and give us their own perspective in what they are doing. We know that there are still some big players in the country who are also doing their best to prepare for the EUDR. So we'll try to bring them to come and explain to us what they are doing and how we are collaborating together to achieve, to prepare for this new regulation. Just before we go, just also let us know the EUDR takes effect from January 1, 2025. So if you are in this value chain, you can reach out to us. We have solutions that will help you achieve that result. And if you're also working with cooperative of farmers or clusters of farmers, we're also very happy to work with you to provide all the tools you need to achieve this result. Thank you very much for all our audience. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Bjorn, for joining us. I think that we'll come to the end of this webinar, and thank you all for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Same to you. Many thanks.